Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at FEUD, the Seer's Prophecy, which is brought to you by Mindgate Studios. It's for 2 players, ages 14 and up, and games usually run about 40 minutes. 2 clans and a long-held furious grudge, carried stubbornly across winters, across generations, but tonight, the leaders of both clans were startled awake in their beds by the same dream, the same prophecy. The Seer has awakened. They have promised to grant their favor and protection to usher in an age of prosperity, but only for one clan, the fiercest clan. The Seer's final words echo in the minds of both clan leaders as they begin their grim preparations. The feud must be settled through blood and through will. No one remembers what started the feud, but there can be no doubt that the Seer's call will bring it to an end. In FEUD, the Seer's Prophecy, 2 players take up arms as the leaders of rival Viking villages. You will collect resources and coordinate attacks by recruiting and mobilizing units. Both players will use identical sets of cards, but instead of drawing at random, you will choose the card you draw each turn. This will allow for reliable strategies and dynamic counterplay, with multiple ways to outmaneuver your opponents. And the first player to defeat the opponent's leader wins the game. First and foremost, I have to say that this is definitely a near production quality level of a prototype, and it's just really well done. These playmats are just beautiful, and each player gets their own village playmat that you get to work from. You know, battle back and forth between the 2 players. You can man the wall, you can go to your homestead, your market, and your sacred grove, and you even have the graveyard, which does give you benefits as a leader. So, you know, this playmat is everything you need in front of you in order to activate all the things you need to do, move cards around, gain resources, all those things. And then you have the tavern playmat. Now, we're just set up here for the basic game, the starting cards that they suggest. But there's a whole nother level of cards in this game that you can add and mix and match, and you can really randomize how you want to set up these cards and so forth. Now, we'll take a look at those cards, some of the extra cards in a minute, but just know that here is the basics. And I'm going to give you the basics overall of how the game plays and so forth. But what really comes into play is how best you put together your engine for generating the resources and getting the right cards at the right time to battle your opponent. And on this tavern mat are your 3 main resources. At the top, you're going to have your health, your main leader's health. And then we have silver, which you're going to need to buy cards. And you have insight, which is going to be needed as well for some cards and to flip in the sacred grove the cards that you get. So lots of interesting usages for insight. It definitely is a secondary type of resource, but it is going to be key as well. So there are 4 main card types in this game. First and foremost, we have our leader card. He is going to be the most versatile, obviously, and he has his 10 health points, which are represented on the tavern board. He does show his attack, but his attack gains in power the more units that fall into the graveyard. He becomes more ferocious as time goes on, definitely. He will have a shield, and he can block up to 2 units at any one time, which is really nice. And he also has a dual zone purpose. He will be landing on all the diamond nodes on your player board. And so what that means is that he can cross 2 areas and use the abilities of those areas. So he will start in the middle of the board, which means you're going to get silver and you're able to draft a card from the tavern. And then we have knowledge cards, which will be placed face down into the sacred grove. And you can just pull them from the supply. You can pick which one you want, put it face down. You're not paying the cost for it until you actually flip it over and use it in play. So it's an ongoing effect. All of these cards will be an ongoing effect for knowledge. And once you can pay that cost and insight, you flip it over and then you have it for the rest of the game. So as an example, this one here is going to gain you 2 extra silver during your resource phase, but it's going to cost you 5 insight to do so in order to flip it and have it ready and viable for the game. And then we have the unit cards, which are played face up in the middle of the tavern. And through the course of the game, as you draft these cards and buy them and put them into play, there's 4 copies of each. Now, you as a player can only ever acquire 2 of them. So there's always an equal number going back and forth, but it just depends on when and how you get those cards and how you put them into play and try to solidify your strategy on when to use them. So at the top right of the card is the cost in silver. Now below that could be, not in all cases, but it could be an insight requirement. Now, you're not spending insight, you just have to have that much on hand. Then below that is just your attack value, and below that is your health value for the card. And again, like I said, some of these cards are going to have descriptive text on them for abilities that they can do. Some might activate when they die, some might activate at the start of your turn, end of your turn. Lots of different things that can go on with those cards and help you in battle and engaging back and forth. And then finally, we have prophecy cards. These, again, like the knowledge cards, are played face down, and when you go to pick up one of these cards, you can choose which one you want. But these are one-time usage. You're going to pay the cost in the top right, and you're going to just activate the card at the time and do whatever it says. So various things can happen here, and there's a ton of different cards in order to pick from. But again, ton of different costs related to some of those cards and how best to use them. And lastly, let's take a look at your player mat and what all the areas mean. Battlefield is just like it sounds. That's when you're going to be entering into battle. If you're on the wall with a character, they're going to get a +1 for their shield. If you're in the marketplace, then you're going to get resources in the way of silver. If you're in homestead with a character, then you're going to get the ability to draft even multiple cards at a time if you can pay the cost. And then the Sacred Grove. That is also where you're going to be activating your knowledge cards, but also where you get resources for your insight. So you have to have units there in order to get those resources that you need. And of course, the graveyard. When units fall, they move to the graveyard, which, is sad, but it does help out your leader. And gameplay here is super straightforward, really easy to engage with. But where the strategies come into play and the synergies you create between cards and when you put them in play and how you use them, that's some of the really interesting aspects, and how you put together your engine for generating resources. But your turn, super straightforward. Start of your turn, the first thing you're checking to see is if you have any abilities that happen to kick off your turn, actually activate now. And then you can move any of your units. Units that are in zones, you can move to an adjacent zone. Your leader can move to an adjacent diamond node. It's really that simple. And you can move all of your units if you choose to. And then you'll gather resources. Based on the units that you have in your Sacred Grove will determine how many insight points you get. And then you take a look at your units that are in your marketplace. So here, for example, we have a leader and 2 villagers. That would gain you 3 silver, which is fantastic. So you can see that as you put these units into play and as you start to generate the different types of resources, it become really key indeed. Now, obviously, villagers are not somebody you're going to send out to the battlefield, so they really are held behind to try to gain you those resources. And then, based on the units you have in your homestead, will determine how many cards you can actually draft or buy this particular round. Now, again, you have to be able to pay the cost of that as well. So it's really that simple what you're doing for the different resources. You're getting your insight, you're getting silver, and you're getting cards. And then you can choose to go into battle if you want, depending on what you have in the battlefield and how you best use those cards. But all attacks are going to happen simultaneously, but you as the attacker will first assign who you are attacking, and then your opponent can assign whatever blockers they want for that. And then all that combat happens simultaneously. So again, it's just a comparison thing where you're looking at the abilities of the card, you're looking at what its attack value is and how much damage you're going to be doing versus their health. And if you didn't do all the damage, then you have markers to place on cards and so forth. For the leaders, though, you just mark it off on the main tavern board. So as an example, the swordsman card, he will just attack with a 4, he's got a health of 3. Now, he also has this ability that when he dies, he deals 1 damage to a target unit as he dies from the battlefield and moves to the graveyard. So that's a really interesting aspect because it might be strategic to use him first so he dies, so your leader can then use him as part of his attack. So there's definitely a lot of back and forth of how best you use the cards and so forth. But it just depends on who's attacking and who's blocking and who's defending and so forth. But that's really that simple. You're just comparing values, and the abilities of the cards might do various things as well. So the end of your turn is just about activating any end of turn abilities. And that's really what you're doing on your turn. Now, as you begin the game, you'll see that really to start things off, kick things off, you're gonna be like generating resources, trying to get knowledge cards into play and getting ready to have units charge into battle and so forth. So you're really kind of building up your forces, and it definitely has that feel as you build up the different types of units and get things ready and try to have some of those ongoing abilities in play that really help you and aid you in defeating the other leader. Now, one last look at the cards. Again, these are the basic cards, and you can see based on their value, how much they cost, they start to ramp up in strength and so forth. But as you get more deeper into the game and as you start to learn it, then you can add additional cards and really mix and match how you see fit. But they've also provided this amazing system for filing and organizing the cards within the box. It really works well. But some of those more advanced cards, let's just take a look at a handful of them. You have the Spearman. you have the Thief, you have the Vengeful Soul, and you have the Marauder. Some of these are, I picked these specifically because these are some of my favorite cards, but they really add a lot more flavor to the game when you have these deeper cards and richer abilities in play to go after your opponents. But again, all the cards are going to be available to each player equally, so it really is this tug of war back and forth as you try to whittle down the leader's health. And whoever does first will win the game. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, the thing that makes this game really rich and strong is the different types of cards, and there are so many, way more than what I showed you here. Just adding that bit of synergy and combos and how best you put those cards into play and go after your opponent. Like I said, it does feel like a tug of war back and forth as you whittle down your opponents. I love that aspect, and how it kind of ramps up slowly as you build those resources and build your engine and having ongoing effects and abilities that really aid you. And the tug of war does feel real here. It's a really interesting aspect as you battle against your opponents. And I also like the fact that the cards are very self-explanatory, so even a new player can come in and be competitive. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.